Here I am today with Robyn Davidson, somewhere in rural Victoria. Robyn is, in my opinion, an amazing and totally engrossing writer. She's published several books. The main two with which I'm familiar is the aforementioned Tracks and her most recent, a biography titled Unfinished Woman. She's been awarded the Medal of the Order of Australia. Is that akin to a knighthood?
Gosh, I don't know what the equivalent is. I don't think so.
Our highest honour. But, as is a perennial theme in this podcast, Robyn's ride to literary fame was unintentional and riddled with serendipity. She did not seek the subsequent fruits which that journey across the desert brought to market. To get some money, she wrote a piece to National Geographic. It took off perhaps unlike anything else they'd ever published. Robyn was now on the scene as one of Australia's great writers. London, famous circles of people, publishers, movies, praise, all became doors ajar to Robyn. But she wasn't chasing that, maybe even hated the new fame and the expectations. She just wanted to pursue her interests. Robyn has an enduring fascination for nomadism. She's contributed a quarterly essay to the topic, many other articles, a book, and has walked the walk, spending years at a stretch with various nomadic communities across the world. She speaks very straightforwardly and sympathetically about depression, talks openly about suicide, and is as eclectically interested as anyone I could ever hope to meet. Robyn is without a doubt, and please forgive the brown nosing, but a dream guest of mine on this podcast. I once responded to a question in a grant application that the people I admired most were great adventurers, great writers, and great journalists. In Robyn Davidson, we have a pure expression of that combination. Anything else you want to add there?
No, that's so lovely, though. I feel a bit shy.
Well, it is my absolute pleasure to now play the interview for which we just recorded.
Thank you, Ryan. That's very sweet.
Just dive right into it.
Do.
You're worried about the narrative fallacy in writing the memoir. Do you think the same applies to doing an interview?
I think whenever you have to speak in a certain way, in a certain form, no matter how truthful you want to be, there is some process by which you are making a character of yourself. Mm. So there's a weird kind of doubling going on.
And you're worried about doing the Robyn Davidson performance?
The Robyn Davidson performance, exactly.
But what is that?
Well, I suppose I see it more when I'm writing. It's much more clear then that the Robyn Davidson on the page is not the real Robyn Davidson. And that doesn't mean there's any untruths or any lies or that it's not genuine. I take a lot of trouble to try to get my ego out of the way. But nevertheless, the process of writing is a creative process. You are emphasising some things, ignoring other things, creating structure. And all of that, particularly when you are a character in that work, well, you become a character. Mm.
Is it because it's also elevated? You spend so much time constructing the perfect sentence, and it feels like that maybe isn't really who I am. This is the best possible version of myself? Or is it something else?
No, it's something else. Something else. I mean, I care deeply about making good sentences. You know, I care a lot about not writing shit, basically. No, it's more to do with making a character on the page. And that character is a sort of doppelganger. She is me, but she's not quite me. It's quite disconcerting when you think about it. I think most writers don't think about it, particularly in this memoir. It was very important for me to be aware of that. And as I said before, to get my ego out of the way as much as possible.
And that's because the problem of memory, which you have spoken about, like you're finding correlation between causation when in fact, how can you even say so many years past the event whether they had anything to do with each other or not?
Yeah, indeed. Look, it's partly that, but I think it's more subtle than that. It's some strange process. If you're a writer and if you're using the first person pronoun, you are necessarily creating a character. And how conscious you are of that is the sort of, I guess, is the morality of the memoir. And I do think it's an extremely slippery genre. In fact, I don't particularly like memoir. But I felt compelled to write this one for all sorts of reasons, but also compelled to take it very seriously in the sense of the responsibility of talking about other people, the responsibility of trying to get to the truth of the past, whatever the hell that is, and the responsibility of keeping that instinct to make yourself better than you are, which is what I mean by the ego, very present. So each time I'd sit down at the computer, it would be a real conscious effort to get that sort of stuff out of the way and really try to get to something. I hate the word authentic, but that's kind of it.
Why do you hate the word authentic?
Oh, just because it's overused and it's not quite the right word either. It's something, I suppose, truth. To try and get at the truth without us even knowing what the truth is, but trying to get to the value of truth, I would say.
Because of the memory gap and the difference between your person and the other person's experience when recalling a memory.
Precisely.
You've only got one perspective there.
Precisely. And even that perspective is up for grabs, because what I noticed was that I'd go back to some memory and it would be as clear as a bell. Then maybe 2 months later,
Really?
I would go back to that memory and it'd just be slightly different. Just slightly different.
Which calls into question, was the first memory or the second memory the one to go off?
The versions of... Well, I think what happens is that in retrospect, memory is imagination. It's not a fixed thing. It's mixed and merged with imagination necessarily. So that is what memory does. It transforms and slightly alters and brings in a bit of this and leaves out a bit of that.
Did you ever see, or read rather, Ian McEwan's Atonement?
I haven't. I've got it, but I haven't read it.
Well, it's exactly this sort of theme.
Right.
This event that takes place from 3 or 4 different characters' perspectives, and each one's memory of it being different, with it having disastrous outcomes.
Of course. Well, there's a famous Kurosawa film, Rashomon, which was exactly that premise. And, you see the first bit of the film and you think you know exactly what's happened. And then the second bit of the film, you see it from another perspective, and the first perspective's completely thrown aside, and then the third one, and so on. So you get a kind of composite of what might have actually happened.
Right, which is what do you call it, the morally dubious, or morally, better adjective after the morally, the problem of memoir writing.
I think so. People think it's an easy genre, but I think it's the hardest genre. To make something to elevate it above just me, look at me. Because in my case anyway, the I of the narrative, the personality of that person is just not at all interesting to me. The fate of that person is interesting, and it's the fate that I know best because it's mine. But it wasn't written in the way I think a lot of memoirs are, which is sort of about the self. It wasn't really written about the self, it was written about this rather extraordinary fate.
And it is also kind of an unusual memoir, because it isn't just a linear timeline of a series of events that in your extraordinary life have happened to you and you've experienced. It's kind of, this is also a very cliche word, kind of mythical or spiritual, or it's grand descriptions of a place, and then we'll move on 20 years down the timeline to another experience. And so in that way, it's also maybe rather unusual. Is that your attempt to lift?
It was not an attempt to lift, but an attempt to write according to how I think the mind actually works, and how memory is for me, certainly. We try to make this linear narrative, but the truth is, at least for me, again, when I think of the past, I see it more geographically than temporally. I can sort of, with a lot of effort, try and make it fit into a timeline, but that doesn't come naturally at all. It's like spotlights on a dark field, and there's an enactment in that spotlight. And then next to it might be another enactment that happened 10 years later, and then another one sort of over there that was when I was a child. So that's sort of how I see memory, and in writing the book, I tried to make the structure reflect that.
I've rejiggered Nassim Taleb's definition of the narrative fallacy. Tell me if this fits with what you're thinking.
Okay.
We invent neat, linear, emotionally satisfying stories to explain what happened, but the world is rather messy, chaotic, and driven by chance. The narrative fallacy makes us overlook randomness and uncertainty because we crave meaning and coherence.
That's it. Very well said. Indeed. Well, we have to make coherence out of it somehow.
Yes. And so Is being complimented on your writing the highest form of praise you can receive?
Personally, or you mean for the books?
Personally.
No, I'm very glad of it because, as I said before, I don't want to write crap. But, I have no illusions about my vast talents. I don't sort of care about that in a way. I want to make something as good as I can make it. I'm unusual in this sense that I don't identify, totally as a writer. And perhaps that's because of the strange way I came to it. But I feel that my identity is filled with all sorts of characters.
This is a pretty sappy question, but how would you then identify yourself if not as an author and a writer? Just a person, right? Hence the sappiness.
Well, it's a very difficult question to answer without being flippant. And when I say person, that is a flippant answer. Obviously, when I'm writing, I'm very deeply involved in it. And if someone asked me what I was then, I'd probably say, yes, I'm writing a book, and therefore I'm a writer, I suppose. But I don't quite feel comfortable saying I am a writer. What does that even mean? I am a dog trainer. I am a householder. I am 1,000 million things. Obviously, writing's a very important part of that, but it is not it's not how I encapsulate my identity.
And maybe with the theme of the book, this interview will also be very non-linear.
Probably.
So we'll jump to, say, your 30s and 40s in the Himalayas. There is, at least from my best attempt to make a timeline of your life, many years here without you publishing work and writing.
That's correct.
So what are you doing in this time of your life?
Again, it's quite hard for me to answer questions like that because I have to think linearly. Oh, what was I doing? Well, I think the easiest way to answer it would be that after Tracks, which I thought would be a one-off thing, suddenly it was assumed I was a writer, a born writer. And so I was sort of pressured into writing another book. So, okay, I sort of took that bait. I wrote a novel, a rather bad novel. And then after that I was sort of at a loose end, not quite knowing what I wanted to do. And I decided then to do this project in India with nomads because it fitted into, I thought, this interest in how...
Your publishable niche.
Well, no, it actually wasn't that at all. No, I was very resistant to writing another travel book, in inverted commas, because I didn't want to be labelled. It felt quite important for me to sort of sidestep all of that fixing and labelling. But it came about through chance that this opportunity arose to do a project in India with these nomads, and it fitted into something I was deeply interested in, which is how nomadism or how people move affects their culture and how they think. So that's when I went to India, and Desert Places came out of that. Again, after that, well, I did the anthology and various small things, but I wasn't driven to write another book. Again, it comes around to this idea of if you have a firm identity, then you're sort of trapped in it. And I really didn't want that. If I was going to write another book, it'd have to be something I really wanted to do and had an importance for me, not just because I was a writer who had to produce another book.
Yeah, another commercial opportunity.
Yes, exactly. I've never cared about that.
The theme throughout Unfinished Woman is a lot of the road not taken, what ifs. And so because of a letter, I think it was Doris something, you wrote her a letter.
Yeah.
And she said, well, if you can write a letter, you can write a book.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden...
She said, if you can write a good letter, you can write a book.
Right, exactly. I suppose it's an important distinction. Yeah. Christopher Hitchens once said, it's true that there is a book in every person, but in that person is where most of it should stay.
Exactly. Quite right.
But because you write this good letter and you're encouraged to write the book, and because of the enormous success of that National Geographic article that was written about you, which you wrote with Rick's photos, there was a publisher's knocking on your door, etc. Like the story had demand.
Yeah.
But had you just turned your eye away from all of that You know, do you have a sense for, or at least a romantic idea for how your life would have
God,
gone up?
who knows? It could have gone in a billion directions. None of us understand that, you know, just on the tiniest turning point, you can head off in a billion different directions. And also, my reasons for writing tracks were complicated. In fact, it was Doris who sort of talked me into doing the book, didn't talk me into it, but said that's when she said, if you can write a good letter, you can write a good book. But more important for me was, I thought, because I was so, sorry, I'm being a bit incoherent, because the sudden fame and attention was so unexpected. I mean, totally out of the blue. I had no idea that was going to happen, because the journey had been a very private, something that I wanted to do just for itself. I had no intention of writing about it, nothing. It was just for me. And then all this brouhaha happened. So I thought, in my innocence, if I write a book, this sort of public world can have the book.
Right.
And I will be left alone to get on with my life. Yeah. And of course, what happened then, the book became a big bestseller. So every time I've sort of tried to step back from it, it's like fate takes over and makes a bigger...
It's funny you thought that, because instinctually, maybe it's just through my own experience I would think this, but you know, I would attach so much romantic projection onto the author of that book. Who is the person who would do such a thing? They must be endlessly interesting and fascinating, and I want to know everything that they're doing from now until the end of time.
God help us.
Which is, I suppose, how it went.
Well, it had a strange effect, that book, and I'm still not sure quite. I mean, it's never been out of print. I still have gorgeous young people coming up to me and saying, "You changed my life." Young people. There was something about that book that it didn't just catch the zeitgeist at the time, which indeed it did, but there was something more than that at the bottom of that book. I think it was it follows some sort of mythical trajectory, perhaps. And of course I was occupying what had traditionally been a sort of male place, I guess. Not that I thought of it like that, but I can see how other people might have thought, particularly other women, would have thought of it like that. So the effect that book has had has also been very surprising and somewhat bewildering to me. I mean, I'm very lucky, dead lucky.
Okay, forgive me, we are jumping around a bit, but so this is after the success of Tracks. But the journey itself of Tracks, I suppose maybe it's hard to say where it begins, but I'd like to start from at least you moving to Sydney after your school has finished and you're vagabonding around. I believe you squatted in an abandoned Erskineville house.
I did.
You fell in with a poker den. You were renting in Paddington and a whole bunch of places.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we have to situate all this in a particular era. Very important, that. I mean, I'm sort of made by 68, early 70s, that culture. And it's a very narrow little window, that. Sort of 68 to 73, I'd say.
The revolutionary moment.
That moment. And young people in particular were all, pushing boundaries, really pushing boundaries. And kind of there was the sense that we were tilling new ground because there was nothing ahead of us. We were breaking new ground all the time. It was a terrific time to be young, but of course there were a lot of casualties to that time as well.
From drug use?
Everything, wildlife, But I'm very grateful that I was formed during that time. I think it was enriching and incredibly privileged in lots of ways. When I say privileged, I don't mean with money. I mean with a kind of psychic opportunity, I guess, something like that.
Well, what does that mean?
It meant that my lot had this sense of going out into the world, and freedom was this huge value, and sort of finding out what you could do, who you were, how you could change the world. We really did believe we could change the world for the better. Hugely experimental, dangerous in lots of ways, but also we really looked after each other. There was a tremendous sense of brotherhood, sisterhood, if you like, globally, not just in one place, but a whole sense that You belong to this movement of...
What movement was that, at least in Sydney?
Well, it was sort of like everywhere. It was politics. Politics was the root of it. Changing things, making things, uprooting what had been corrupt and sort of anti-human. Mm-hmm. So it involved rights for Aboriginal people, it involved feminism, it involved, 1,001 things, racism,
economic upheaval,
all of that. So there were various flavours, but there was a sense of great community as well. Even when there were antagonisms within, at the foundation of it all was this sense of togetherness and making a better world. Really, it was like that.
You just sort of stumbled into it because you went to Sydney with $60 in your pocket.
Yeah.
And I loved this detail from the book. You're just walking through Centennial Park, walking up to North Bondi, just walking around the entire day and then sleeping on a park bench or squatting in an abandoned house at night. Yeah. Then you end up falling in with these people.
Well, I was a very unformed young person. For various reasons, I hadn't developed certain skills in life. And I knew that about myself. I knew that I was unformed, ignorant to the back teeth, and needing to learn, needing to catch up and to learn really how to be a human in the world. So that really was my project at that time. I guess I was 18 or something like that. So I hopped on a truck, got a lift on a truck, went to Sydney. As you say, I had $60, which was quite a lot of money then. It felt like a lot of money. And I just landed in Sydney and I lived on the streets. But these days, if you say you lived on the streets, it means something very negative or something tragic. Whereas for me, it was complete freedom. It was like being an aristocrat, being a traveller in the world, free. I slept in parks. I don't know how long that period was, a month probably, maybe it's all fuzzy.
It's a long time.
Yeah, but I learnt that city. I walked everywhere. I walked miles and miles every day, sort of learning where I was, learning how it worked, and then eventually found this abandoned little cottage and went in and squatted there and started reading, mostly stealing books, frankly.
Which I think was, you said, the only type of theft you never felt guilty about.
That's right. And also one thing I'm very proud of is that Tracks for a number of years was the most stolen book in Australia. Nice. So I feel I paid my dues.
Absolutely.
So it was a huge learning period and self-education, autodidact period of life. And when I felt that I had done enough of that to be able to sort of move out a bit, then I sort of became part of that political life in Sydney with what was then called the Push, which was a very disparate group of artists and bohemians and intellectuals and so on. And so I lived that sort of life, sharing houses, and again learning all the time. Money, of course, was always, we were always getting odd jobs. I was a waitress often, bars, artist model, and then got a job in this gambling club. I became a poker dealer. That was my role in the club. But I just fell in love with that game. It's the transcendent game.
And it was 5-card stud.
5-card.
I think as well you also played it quite a bit.
I played it enough.
Yeah, there was a back and forth about how you sometimes had to manage the table to make sure the sharks would stay. Not the sharks, the whales would stay.
Yes.
And the sharks would leave.
The punter, the mug punters. Yes. Well, there'd always be a house player at the table. And usually that was the proprietor, Billy. And sometimes he couldn't be there, so often it'd be one of the bouncers. But sometimes that couldn't happen, so it'd be me. So I had to learn how to play.
The true shark.
Yeah, true. And I just, it was sort of absolutely fascinating to me, that game. And it was an extraordinary experience in that club. Often we'd be playing a game for 30 hours, keeping going on speed and whiskey and coffee. And with this, because it was illegal then, so it was a criminal fraternity. And they also were fascinating people. And that was, I guess, a couple of years of my life, or a year, I can't remember, but it seemed long enough.
Did that working in gambling, was that vice a part of the revolutionary political freedom this push movement was involved in? Or did you catch some, side eyes from some of your friends?
No, they would never have judged me, no. They wouldn't have. Some of them were gamblers. I mean, it's hard to explain that era. There was tremendous generosity, always. This sort of bohemian, I suppose, way of choosing to be against a system that we felt essentially corrupt. So even say in the gambling club, okay, it was run by these crims, but they were paying off the police. The whole of the sort of legal police structure was corrupt. So, who are the bad guys there?
It really does sound like, I suppose that's why there's so much romanticization looked back on that period, because I can imagine it would have been great to have just been able to fall into a group of people who are all generous, kind-hearted, and
crazy people.
Kind of wild and open-minded. Nothing's off limits.
Truly.
But then you do write that, and this is also, there's a lot of echoes in some details of your life with Christopher Hitchens. I'm not sure if you're aware of that or not.
No.
But so I won't go into it now, maybe we'll get it later, but...
Goodness, I had no idea.
Well, maybe we'll get into it straight away. It does turn towards your mother, though.
Okay, sure. No, up to you. I'm happy to go where you go.
So Hitchens was born 49.
Right, year before me.
Very similar to you. Mm-hmm. And he was raised in Portsmouth, which was a Navy kind of rough and tumble town in the UK. His father was much older than his mother. His mother was not an urbanite, but had aspirations for it. She wanted to go to the concert and she wanted to have witty conversations with her smart friends at a London restaurant. But instead she was put in this rural town, kind of austerity driven, with an older former army husband who maybe really wanted to, have this emotional side to him, but it was never accessible.
Yeah. Sounds very similar.
And she ended up suiciding.
She suicided.
Yeah.
How old was
Hitchens was in his early 20s.
Huh, okay. I didn't know that. I knew Christopher.
And she was ethnically Jewish.
Boy, sort of scary.
And I'm not surprised that you would have known Hitchens. You at least at one point definitely traveled in the same circle. Yeah. But anyway, he also speaks in his own memoir, much more comfortable with making it all about him.
Yeah, of course.
I think, than you were.
Yes.
But about him also being swept up in this revolutionary moment of 68 and 69. And, he was a big shot at Cambridge and politically at the front of it, holding speeches. And we're going to change the entire fucking world to watch us.
Yeah.
And then it all sort of crumbling down.
Indeed.
And him making the same observation as you, which is that half of them maybe completely burnt themselves out with psychosis and all the drugs, and then the other half just went off into white shoe law firms. And
absolutely. Yes. Which they would have done if that little period hadn't intervened. Sure. Yeah. Well, it was, for me anyway, one of the reasons why I think I did the trip across Australia was something to do with that, the mood of the early 70s of having failed, or it having been a bit, we're all, well, what happened, like, poof. And a lot of the energy, that sort of confident energy, had sort of dissipated into different sorts of movements, and that sense of purpose had pretty much dissipated, at least for me. So finding something to replace that, something that, again, that search for meaning that we all do, that was a large part of choosing to do the camel trip.
And so you get in a train to Alice Springs. You have this shocking introduction to the city on the train. This old fella comes up and essentially just tries to court you directly for the price of a beer.
I've forgotten that.
No, but it's just such a stark introduction to this frontier town, which was Alice Springs.
Yeah, it was a very rough place then, a very racially tense place. It was a horrible place, actually.
Yeah, you describe it very, very, very well. So I'm going to butcher it completely, but some feeling is I hated this place, but I really wanted to be here. Something along those lines.
Don't remember that, but it was certainly a compelling place because also, again, politically, land rights legislation was about to happen. I got there just before the influx of young, tertiary educated, leftish people who came in to help administer the Act and to set up pro-Aboriginal organisations to help Aboriginal people organise themselves to work for Aboriginal people. So the first year there was really very grim because I stood out I really stood out.
Right.
And I got a lot of antagonism, and I was genuinely appalled when I saw the kind of overt racism and cruelty there. And then these young people started arriving, and of course they became my sort of friendship group. And those friends are still very tight even now, later. Yeah.
They still live in Alice?
Some do, some don't, mostly not.
But you get off the train and you end up falling in at the pub, working there for a bit. This is after as well, kind of vagabonding for a period of time.
Yeah.
But then you fall under the employment of Kurt, who just seems like such a maniac.
He was a complete maniac. But the more I sort of think about Kurt, now that I'm older, I realise how much I actually owe him in a way. I mean, he was a monster and he treated me appallingly, and he backed out of our deal after I'd worked for him for nothing for a year. But I think because he was so rigid, I had to learn the skills that he had really well, like from the bottom up. So I owe him. He had a camel farm and I went to work for him, and he was a bully and a monster, but every day, I was up at 5, I had to do everything perfectly. He insisted that I do everything perfectly. So I learned a lot about camels.
And the idea is that you would work for him and then you would get 3 camels. Yeah. And he totally scored you on the deal, and you ended up then getting camels from this really kind Afghani fella. And it turns out that with Afghani immigration, I don't know the year, but they brought in a bunch of camels.
Sort of 18.
Really? That long ago?
Yeah.
So why did Australia bring them over to begin with?
To open up the desert areas. They were building the overland telegraph. That came a bit later, if I remember. But to build roads, build infrastructure, get goods out to remote communities. So the Afghans brought these long strings of camels for transport. Yeah, they're extraordinary people.
But they were constructing their own demise in a way?
Indeed.
Because they were no longer necessary?
Once all that infrastructure was there, and it's sort of a sad story in many ways, because they let their camels go when they were no longer economically feasible. And of course what then happened was that the camels had found paradise, and they have replicated, hugely, and they're now doing a lot of damage in the desert along with all other introduced animals. So it's a sad thing, really.
But they are world-class camels now.
They're very well. The sorts of camels they brought in were draft animals, heavy lifters. So they're not racing animals like you see in UAE and places like that. But they're pretty much disease-free. They're very strong because of their original genetics, but they've also been in this fabulous place for them. They're fat and doing very well. So, yes, they're very high-quality camels.
And then you end up getting these camels and you embark on this magnificent journey. And at some stage, Rick comes into your life. Do you think that without his photos that the story would have ever have gotten as big as it got?
No, the photos were a huge part of it. And I was very ambivalent about having the photographer there. I was very ambivalent about approaching National Geographic because I felt I was selling out.
But you needed the money.
I absolutely had to somehow find a couple of $1,000, and that's all it was. And again, it doesn't sound like much now, but it was a lot then. To get my equipment, I had to build everything myself, but I still needed stuff. I needed to buy a rifle, I needed blah, blah. So I met Rick in Alice Springs. He'd seen me cleaning windows, which was one of my jobs out there. And I think he was a bit dazzled. And he said, well, why don't you write to Geographic? And I said, Geographic. And he convinced me, and I did. And there was a very sweet editor there who took it seriously and came to visit me, and they gave me $4,000, I think, can't remember, something like that, a fortune. So that actually allowed me to get all the gear together and plan the whole thing properly. But I was very ambivalent about Rick visiting me on the trip to take pictures. I didn't want him there. I didn't want anyone there. And I think I was a bit naive about that. I didn't have any idea really what that would mean. I mean, certainly personally I felt a bit queasy because it was like selling out, as I said, but I had no idea how it would affect a public persona. And of course, he took the most exquisite photos. I mean, they are beautiful, beautiful photos. But when I first saw them, I said, Rick, you've made me look like a Vogue model. That's not me. And I understood then the implications, the repercussions of having these images, which were essentially Rick's trip, Rick's vision, not mine. And if that journey was to do with anything, it was to do with being the subject of my own life, not an object. And beautiful as those photos were, they turned me into an object. And also I had no idea I was beautiful, none. I had no idea. But you look at those photos and there's a beautiful, blonde, young woman in a sarong riding a camel. How could you go wrong? But all of that had nothing to do with me.
But you were 27, 28 at the time.
Yeah.
How did you not have a sense for your own beauty?
Well, it's a complicated question. A lot of women don't have a sense of their own beauty. Some do, and they're lucky. But I never have. I don't know why. It's just, I suppose it's not important. It's not how it's not how I think of myself. I think of myself as a person. I look in the mirror, it's not bad, not terrible, but it sort of doesn't, it's not something I feel I own and therefore can use, if you know what I mean.
But just forgive me if this is really bad observation, but by the time you're 27, 28, you've had male attention, You've met lots of other women, and you surely must have gotten a sense for, I can evoke these responses in people. There must be something about me that is alluring, whether it's not just how you physically look, but also how you are.
Complete mystery.
Okay. Do you think, because I've having only known you for 20 minutes, but having, gotten to know you in a very more intimate sense through reading your books, like there is something alarmingly disarming about you. Do you have any sense for what that is? Is it something you've grown into? Do you think you've sort of always had it?
Do you know, I just don't know.
Do people make that observation?
Yes, they have. I think perhaps because that lack of nous that I had as a young person and, my early history, perhaps. I'm an oddball. I don't really fit anywhere. And things that concern other people often I don't care. Yeah, I don't really know how to answer it better than that. But I don't... My values are to do with something else. Trying to find out what life's for, what it's about.
And because the values exist over there, everything over here is just I don't even know. Yeah,
I don't even know, and it's just chance anyway.
You mean genetically how you might end up looking?
And in fact,
like
so much of it is chance.
It's not
exactly. Right. It's not anything I did, and therefore, it's probably affected my life being beautiful. I don't know, but it's not something that I've ever felt that belonged to me. I guess that's what I would say.
Do you think, in a sense, it sort of belongs to your mother?
She was pretty and unusual. No, it's just the luck of the draw. Totally chance.
This might be out of place, but I can't help but think about it since you've just said that. But you close the book and the opening chapter with the same line, which is, my mother is as close to me and as hidden from me as my own face, with that last part maybe echoing this theme you're doing here. But I mean, I don't really get what that means. I don't understand that.
Well, the first part, my mother is as close to me. I'm from her body, so... But she is hidden from me in the same sense that I am hidden from me. You can see my face. I can't. You can have ideas about me that may have nothing to do with me. We're all hidden from ourselves. And I think part of being alive is the job of getting closer and closer to what you might actually be. And therefore so much of what we take to be our own is just chance and doesn't have much to do with us, really.
And by take to be our own, you mean maybe our behaviours or our outcomes?
What we look like, how we behave, all of those things.
Yeah, it feels like you're really informed by the sort of free will argument, the case being that we don't actually have any free will. It's all just one experience after another that started well before we were even born.
Billions
and actions that we'll never be able to see or compute.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Like
I'm sort of on the fence about that. I don't know if you've listened to Sapolsky and indeed Chris Hitchens and a few other...
Sam Harris.
And Sam Harris, indeed. They're sort of radical...
Free willers.
Non-free willers, actually. But I keep a little... I'm pretty much in agreement, but I'd say there's 1% of me that thinks there's room for...
There's room for agency, right?
I think so, somewhere in there, but it's very hard to find, it's very hard to defend philosophically, but I do feel somewhere in there is the possibility of agency, but maybe not.
But therefore, in that agency, you can still take full responsibility for a lot of the outcomes. I don't like how sort of nihilistic that idea is, which is like, whichever direction I go, it's someone else's problem. Rather, you're still the owner of this mind and body moving throughout the world.
Yes. Well, whether you can make a decision, yes or no, we simply don't know, I think. That's what I would say about that, and their confidence. What I would say about the Sam Harris-Chris confidence about that is they make no room at all for the sentence, I don't know. And I kind of worship doubt. I worship the phrase, I don't know.
I think
because if you don't have I don't know, you can't learn anything.
Yeah, it's the end of it.
Yeah.
I hate to disagree with you, but I think you're doing Christopher Hitchens a disservice there. He is certainly at the altar of, we don't know, we don't have the answers. All we can do is try and figure them out.
Yeah.
Whereas, at least in their primary argument against God, is that they're presenting a book that has all the answers. No more questions need dare be asked, because here is everything you ever need to know.
Yeah.
But that sort of gets away from free will, and definitely gets away from you.
Sorry, we went on a tangent there.
Yeah, that's okay. So, look, Tracks is a great movie. Did you like the movie?
I liked the movie.
Yeah.
The movie has a long history. I don't know if you want to know that.
Let's do it. Start us off with Sidney Pollack and your lunch with him.
Sid. Oh, Sid. Again, I'd had no idea, no nous about any of that. I was living in London in Doris's house with my then partner Steve, and once the book was out and there'd been this huge fanfare, I started getting offers for film. And my feeling was that a film should be made in Australia by Australians, but most importantly that I would need to have some control because of the way Aboriginal people might be portrayed. And I felt I had that responsibility to them, that there wouldn't be misrepresentation or so on. Anyway, I got an offer from Sidney Pollack. I know he was flying high out of Africa. A film I didn't particularly like, but anyway. So he took me to lunch, and he was utterly adorable. I really liked him, and he was very funny. And the first thing he said was, well, honey, you're not going to like what I'm going to do to your book. And I just loved him for that, because it was so upfront. He offered me a lot of money. I thought about it, and I said no for the previous reasons that I gave. And then I sort of forgot about it a bit. But then I started getting these other offers, and people, they would send me scripts of such appalling, unspeakable unspeakable wrongness in every way. Just terrible. You would die rather than see this film made. And some of it was very funny. So eventually I sold an option to an English company, a small, they just made a lovely little film called My Brilliant Laundrette. I don't know if you remember, it's long ago. Terrific little film. So I sort of trusted them. And I said, we'll keep it a small film with this Australian content. I've got some control over Aboriginal, blah, blah, blah. So time moves on. I get a call from that company saying, guess what? We're getting a co-production with Hollywood and Julia Roberts is going to play you. And I was just, oh my God, what have I done? Not that I don't love Julia Roberts, but it was just the wrong thing. And then I started getting these scripts. One of which I remember, Robyn Davidson heads off for the desert. She's a very troubled girl. She's a New Yorker. She heads off for the desert. She gets lost in the desert and some Aborigines find her and they teach her the dreaming. And there's a scene where these Aboriginal men sort of carry her around a campfire as she learns the snake dreaming or something utterly unspeakable. Anyway, so that's how that was. And eventually all of that fell through, thank God. And finally then, years and years later, I sold it to Emil Sherman here in Australia. Again, because I really did trust them. Yeah. And the only thing I said was I think Mia Wasikowska should play me because she's just such a lovely little actress, really good actor. And we got her, so that was great. I think they were honourable. They tried to honour the essence of the book. I'm not naive enough to think that a film should be a representation of a book. A film has to solve different problems to a book. Of course it's going to be different. I'm still great friends with Mia, so that's lovely. So all in all, it was quite a good experience. But, again, it doesn't have anything to do with me.
How much money, if you remember, did Sydney offer you?
Look, I think in my mind it's about 600,000 American.
That would have gone in your pocket.
I think so, but I could be wrong. But that's sort of what I remember. Anyway, look, I really don't know. I shouldn't even answer the question because I don't, but that's sort of what I remember. A lot of money.
And even though Sid was up front with him maybe bastardizing your story, is there any part of you that regrets?
Oh, of course, because in the end, you can't control film.
No.
You, as a writer, you've got no control. They can write it into the contract, but you actually don't.
Producer, director, and writer.
That's right. Yeah.
Did you maintain contact with Sidney Pollack after?
No.
Is he still?
No, he died a couple of years ago. Yeah.
Did you ever get a sense for what he thought of Tracks, how it ended up going?
I have no idea. He must have liked it or he wouldn't have wanted to make a film.
No, the film that was made.
Oh, I think he died before it was made. I think. I'm not sure.
So the book is a huge bestseller and you're now plunged into literary fame and you're living in London. Talk about the sort of circles that you're now introduced to, kind of like the literary elite of London, at a very exciting time to be among the literary elite.
Well, I sort of put London into two phases, if you like. The first phase was that phase, the early phase, where I'd been writing to Doris Lessing. We had a correspondence. She was a hero to me through her books. She had actually said, when I asked her, should I not write a book? And she said, if you can write a good letter, blah, blah, blah. And then she said, well, why don't you come to England? If your publishers are here, come to England. And I thought, yeah, okay, why not? So indeed, I went to England via India, which is how India fits into the picture. And I lived in this crummy little flat for a while, writing tracks and getting to know Doris. And eventually she said, look, you shouldn't be living here. I've bought a new house. There's a little apartment underneath it. Come and live with me. So for the next 2 or 3 years, I lived in a little part of her house. And I suppose you would say she was my mentor, my literary mother. I owe her so much.
You quote her in the beginning of tracks. I believe so. I really hope that's right. My gut tells me it is.
Yes,
It stands out.
yes,
Yeah.
of course. Sorry, it slipped my mind. It is a long time ago. She didn't help me with writing at all. That was and I didn't want her to. That's not what that was about. And in fact, when the book was ready for publication, I gave it to her then. And my stomach was in my mouth, as you can imagine. And she came down the stairs, she read it in sort of a gulp, and she looked very severe. And I thought, oh, really, this is terrible. And she said, well, Robbie, it seems you have written a classic.
That must have felt amazing to hear. Did you enjoy it? Because you've spoken a lot about how writing this memoir was extremely difficult. But did you enjoy that process of putting together these sentences and creating this magnificent story of tracks?
With tracks, I did enjoy the writing because I was innocent of what, I didn't have a sense of an audience out there. I didn't have a sense of any self-censorship. I loved literature, but I didn't have a sense of suddenly joining that gang. It wasn't, I was just telling this story as best I could. So I did enjoy the work, and I worked very hard at it. And what I found fascinating, again, this is about memory. In that first phase of writing the first draft of tracks, in that weird little flat, not the Doris one, the one before, I remembered every single campsite of that 8-month journey. Every one.
Yeah, that's kind of remarkable.
Incredible. It was so deeply...
So you could walk
sort
to the day,
of,
see
yeah,
it.
amazing. But as I wrote the book, those memories seemed to sort of dissolve. And it was like the book cannibalized the memories. It's a very strange process.
Yeah, that is strange.
Yeah, really.
Today, can you remember a lot of those camps?
Well, I can if I really apply myself. But again, the photographs have interfered with that a lot. And I realised that I might be remembering somewhere, but then somehow there'll be a photograph that's getting in the way, or it's a bit suspiciously similar. And again, this mystery of memory, how the hell it works. Yeah. It's a very slippery, complicated phenomenon.
And stylistically, did you take any inspiration, or was that all just original Robbie? This is her.
Totally original.
Do you think you write as you speak?
Yes, I think I'm very audial. I think that's well spotted. And I also often will read it. If I've written something, I'll read it aloud. And I can hear if it's overwritten or there's an adjective too many. It's that sort of thing.
Or the same words appeared too many times in paragraphs.
Yeah. And also it's about rhythm and flow.
Again, a cliche, but very lyrical in the way you write.
Well, I think music had a lot to do with that, I think. Music's been important in my life and in my family. So that's possibly connected to how I write, maybe.
You were yourself a musician?
And I was, yes.
Do you still get on the keys?
Look, I just recently decided, I have a piano in there, I'll show you later. I've just recently decided that, no, I won't play anymore.
Okay, why is that?
Because I hear how bad I am.
No, don't be like that. That's all right.
It should be all right, and I thought, well, if it doesn't give me a lot of pleasure, I'd rather put on a CD and listen to some other genius playing Chopin rather than me,
And with your writing style, and forgive me if this is too in the weeds, but it's one of the things I really want to extract, if possible, from writers I admire. Actually, when they sit down at the keyboard, how do they construct their sentences? So are you sentence, rewrite, next sentence, rewrite, or are you dump, rewrite? Do you go in big bursts of energy, or do you have a routine?
Certainly don't have a routine. I wish I did. I think it depends on, with me, each book has been a bit different that way. Tracks, I could work 8 hours a day. Absolute focus and concentration.
That would have felt great.
It was terrific. Hard work, but it felt right. That felt right. And I'd write often quite a bit in a day. My partner would read it at night, which was lovely, and often he was quite astute. But also it's just very nice for someone else to read it. But I was pretty ruthless even then with editing, although tracks, because of the nature of the innocence of the writing, it didn't actually need a lot of editing. And luckily I had a very terrific editor, Jonathan Cape, who edited very lightly, and I think she was correct. So it's a bit raw, but it's kept all that energy. So that was tracks, but I guess as I got older and more self-conscious about writing, it became more difficult.
Self-conscious because there is now an expectation?
There's an expectation. There's a literary world that's looking at me. Whoa, very scary. And also one realises that it's actually a responsibility, writing what you put down on paper. And maybe you can't just say anything or what you want to, so suddenly all these strictures, internalised strictures, start to happen. When I wrote Desert Places, well, I was constantly on the move. I was living between London and India. It was a very complicated life. I'd write a little bit in India, and then 2 months later I might write a little bit in England. So a very different sort of process. Again, more difficult than tracks. And then with the memoir, because of the nature of what it was, the internal critic was so loud. And my concern with the morality of it, with the kindness of it, with an awareness of how slippery memory is, all of those things made it very difficult to get to the computer every day.
Okay, really?
Oh.
But once the words started flowing, did you find yourself deleting all the time?
Some days would flow, some days nothing, with tremendous procrastination all the time, painful process. Mostly I'd say I'd get stuff down and then edit again, and then edit again, and then edit again, and then read it aloud and edit again, and then move on to some next bit, not necessarily in a linear way. It was sort of like a jigsaw.
You were scrapping together different chapters.
Yeah, like a sort of jigsaw is what it felt like.
Back to whatever the original question was, which is about this literary circle that you're now a part of as a, the new hot author on the market, this aspirational woman. Who were the circles that you're involved with?
This is the first part of London, which was really centred around Doris. Now, Doris was an extraordinary and unusual person. She was highly individualistic. She'd had a colonial background like me, so she was both part of and highly respected in a literary circle in London, but also fundamentally an outsider.
Colonial background means she wasn't from the UK?
She was from Africa.
Oh, okay, right.
And she had arrived in England with a baby under one arm and 10 quid in the other, sort of in the 50s, I guess, yeah. So she was both of that world and unusual in that world, and not English. So I did meet famous people through her, but characteristic of Doris's get-togethers, there'd be some poor person she'd found in the street and brought in. There'd be her son's school friends. There'd be some ultra-hyper, ultra-famous person. There'd be a social worker that she'd found doing good works. Like, she was egalitarian in that way that was very unusual in England. And again, this sort of quest for the genuine meant that I wasn't interested in people's fame or status. What I was interested in was knowledge and whether people were genuine or not.
Did you find that typically the famous names which me and the audience might recognise didn't meet that standard?
often, because they're just people like anyone else.
Yeah.
So sometimes you'd like them, sometimes you wouldn't like them. Sometimes you thought they were a twat, sometimes you thought they were fantastic, just like everyone else.
Did Christopher Hitchens meet the fantastic standard?
I liked Chris, but I met him in the second phase.
The second phase, okay.
So
I'm jumping around.
So that was the first phase,
Yeah.
and I was still very young and very green, very naive.
You're 28, 9?
How old was I? So 81, I would have been 31 when Tracks was published.
Nice.
So then I went back to Australia. Life moved on. I sort of had a life in Australia. I then left my partner, and that's when I met Salman, and went back to London with him, and that was sort of the second phase, where I met a whole different kind of literary world that was very concerned with literary status. Again, very impressive, many impressive people, but it was a different social milieu to the one I'd had with Doris.
Speaking of Salman,
Yeah.
In the book you don't even mention his name, and in interviews, and even now it's like hard to say the word. I sense that you want to move away from that as quickly as you can. So I just want to be sensitive as to not pick at a deep wound.
It's not that so much as fame is a very distorting thing, and it was a hugely important relationship for all sorts of reasons, but I don't mention him because it's not important who he was. What was important was the effect that relationship had, and its sort of relationship to the past and so on, and what his name was utterly irrelevant.
But at least for me, it stands out as a name on the page. Oh wow, time with Salman Rushdie. This is after he's had a death sentence put on him. He's in the height of his fatwa.
Well, I was living with him through the writing of Satanic Verses.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So it was that was very much part of the tumultuousness of that time.
Yeah, you write about the relationship. It was an excited infant love, a gone nuclear. Why did it go nuclear?
Who knows? I mean, we were both deeply neurotic people, I guess. A very intense relationship, hugely intense. He was writing Satanic Verses, so was sort of occupying a strange sort of headspace anyway. I was having to fit into this whole new London, quite insecure. Also trying to write a book, which I had no idea how to do or why I should do it, but I'd, sort of been told I should write a novel, so okay. So I think the combination of things, I saw it, I think, as us both being like children, emotionally like children. These two children got together and it was sort of explosive, and neither of us had the equipment really to, emotional equipment or the equipment of maturity to make it work. It was just too hard.
So the highs were incredibly high, but the lows were as terrible fights and things like this.
Just terrible, and never knowing when it was going to fall apart or why or what I'd done. And
oh, that's horrible.
Yeah, no, it was quite destructive to me anyway.
Yeah,
but fascinating.
Even 40 years after the events?
Well, now I don't think about it really. I mean, I think about it when you ask me about it, but otherwise it's not relevant to me anymore. I don't have any residue of it.
But after his attack, did you feel like, I want to see how he's going? Or?
Well, I felt very disturbed, of course, but in a sense not personally. It was almost like I was disturbed because it had happened to a fellow writer, and that's a terrible, terrible thing. And it was Salman, but somehow that's not what it was about, because I seem to have got rid of that connection, I suppose.
Martin Amis once described him as a falcon looking through a Venetian blind.
He was always good with words,
right.
That boy.
I suppose this is also a person You would have travelled with Hitchens, Amos, Ian McEwan.
Yeah, somewhat. Well, in this second phase, there were Salman's world, and I had to fit into that world. I liked them all. I liked Chris a lot. I liked Martin a lot. I liked his partner a lot. But, I didn't see myself as a literary figure. I suppose that's what was sort of slightly weird for me in that world.
Fish out of water, not interested in the status and the aura.
Not at all.
Yeah.
And sort of looking, I think, for people I could be with without having to be either Salman's partner or a writer or, it was a strange time. But I did meet other people. So that's when I met Julie Christie, and she became a very, very dear friend. And I started to have access to her world at that time. It was something of an alternative. I didn't know them well enough, but I liked them a lot. And that included Duncan Campbell and various other people.
Who just passed away.
Yeah.
You mentioned in one of your interviews, this takes us all the way back to the beginning, about the style of autobiography, but some French author, I think you celebrated that she wrote it saying we, always, never I.
Yes.
And then...
What's her name?
I don't know. But
she's a terrific writer. She won the Nobel, really, for that book. The Years. Terrific book.
But then Salman Rushdie wrote his autobiography under a pseudonymous name, which is also kind of another way of maybe getting away with the problems of memory.
The problems of, yes, indeed.
Here's a fictional character. Sure, it's based on my life.
Yeah, but it's,
But, yeah.
Well, we're getting very used to this now. I mean, it used to be that writing that sort of memoir was, gosh, so radical. Now it's just sort of second nature. It's a postmodern. But that doesn't make it ungenuine. It is, we're responding to something in the atmosphere.
You're in your early 30s. In Unfinished Woman, you talk about not even thinking about your mother until you were in your 40s. But with all these friends that you have and these deep relationships that you have in between then and 40, do you never... People aren't asking you about your family and you reveal to them, well, in fact, my mother committed suicide when I was 11.
Yes, I wouldn't have hidden that fact. People probably knew if it came up in conversation. Yes, my mum suicided when I was a kid in some context of sharing our lives. But really thinking about her, really kind of thinking about, hey, what actually went on back there. And I think this is what children do. It's a survival mechanism. When some tragedy happens, you build a shell, and that is a very good protection. It was very good for me to do that. All this sort of psychobabble about I'm being a bit...
Oh, that's okay.
Well,
lean into it. What do you mean?
I suppose there's the notion that you have to go and inspect everything, and it's, we're all traumatised and real traumatised people are, what am I trying to say? One shouldn't overdo... Yeah, exactly.
But then as well, degrees of different character and how they deal with trauma.
Absolutely. And, I suppose I didn't see my trauma as a trauma. I wouldn't have ever used that word. And it was just a part of what had happened to me, that's all. But then when I approached the age at which she died, which was 46, I was sort of coming up to that time. I was under a lot of pressure. I was living between London and India. A lot of difficulties in life, really. She started to come back, is how I think of it. And also music was starting to come back. So I bought a piano in this complex that I shared with Julie Christie and Sally Potter, a group of us. And I started playing again. And that music started to trigger off memories. And prior to that, I would have said, I have very few memories of my past. But then I realised there was a whole stack of them. I just hadn't bothered to look.
You did the musical passcode.
Exactly. And songs, songs from when I was a kid. And I remember sitting in the bath in Blackbird Yard and suddenly singing to myself Alice Blue Gown, which I'd sung when I was about 8 at at a concert, and just things like that, really quite weird, these memories surfacing, keyed initially by music, but then sort of coming of their own accord because I was looking at them. Mm-hmm. And that's when I first started writing stuff down, not necessarily with an idea to writing a book, but just writing it down because it was so odd.
Somewhere to organise it.
A way of organising it, perhaps, yes. And then I tried to write about it, and I wrote all these beginnings, and I just knew they were all wrong. Mm. And then I decided, okay, I will never write a book about this, it's impossible. Mm. And I wrote a piece. I wrote a little article, I think it was for Granta, I can't remember, talking about memoir and saying why this particular memoir could not be written. And sent it off to my agent, and he said, "You're mad, this is the first chapter." And indeed, that did become the introduction. Yes, where were we?
I initially asked you why, not why, but rather it's kind of perplexing. I'm imagining you have a lot of friends, and a friendship you sort of learn about the other person. And for instance, if we had just met and we were comfortable with each other and you revealed that your mother had committed, I might have asked you, like, why?
Why? Probably would have had an answer back then. I would have said something like, oh, well, she was depressed and, we lived in the country, but I wouldn't have...
You can kind of keep picking at that, like, oh, why was she depressed? Like, what was your father like? What about your sister? I've never really heard you speak about her much. And then maybe I'm just imagining that it seems inconceivable these conversations wouldn't have happened and therefore triggered for you, oh my God, I haven't dealt with this, I haven't thought about this.
I think that was part of who I was, of not thinking about that. Unconscious, but part of the protection, part of the shell, perhaps. So you can have sort of basic memories without actually having gone there and looked.
Right. Really investigating.
Yeah. And also it didn't particularly interest me. I wasn't interested in the past. I hadn't given that mother a thought. From the day she died till then, I honestly hadn't thought about her at all.
Do you have a rational explanation for that you've been able to conjure?
Well, I think because I wasn't interested in the past. I wasn't interested in scrabbling around in all that muck. I was very keen to going ahead and making a life work, finding out about life. And
experiencing the world.
Yes. And the past was there, but not important. And of course then it did become important.
Yeah. Do you have, because a part of how you've dealt with your depression, at least from my understanding of the book, I don't want to, put words in your mouth, no. But is that, really started looking into the neuroscience of it all, chemical imbalances in the brain and environmental factors that might make us feel certain ways. Is there any neuroscientific explanation for why you fall very depressed at a very similar age to your mother, even though environmentally you have completely different circumstances?
Well, school's still out on all of this. We're just beginning to understand how the brain might work. We have no idea what consciousness is. And any scientist who says that they do is just silly, I think. And maybe one day we will have a materialistic explanation, I don't know, but we sure as hell don't now. So why are some brains susceptible to depression or any of these uncomfortable states?
Extreme emotion.
Extreme something. They're just extreme pain. They're actually painful. And it's a weird kind of pain because it hovers somewhere between the physical body and the mental body. But it is a terrible pain, and it is a truly terrible disease. But even then, it teaches you a lot.
Do you still have bouts of very low times?
I certainly have a mutable and melancholic temperament.
Okay. Like to wallow sometimes?
No, I wouldn't say that. I try to deal with it. I don't like being engulfed by it. I've learned how to manage my mental states quite well. And again, they're painful, but they are not without value because they've taken me lots of places.
There was two things that stood out to me regarding the depression and yourself having suicidal ideation.
I knew I would never suicide.
Okay, so because at least I want to make sure I get the right quotes, but there was one time in Tracks and then one time in Unfinished Woman where you did explicitly plan, like, this is going to happen.
I've never planned suicide. No, you're quite wrong.
You talk about in Tracks about I could just walk out into the desert and I could take a gun with me and I'd be a mess to nobody. No one would need to know. And then Kurt's wife sort of snapped you out of it. Not because you were talking about it, but she said something to you which snapped you out of it. And then in Unfinished Woman, you're with your sister. I think, this is long after you spread your father's ashes. Was it with your sister? I think it was with your sister. And you were pretty much saying, like, I'm going to end it all. I'm done. And then she takes a knife, your father's old knife, out of the drawer and says, well, go and help do it then. And that sort of snapped you out of it again.
Look, no, it's not like that. In a sense, for me, the key to the memoir is that section towards the end where I had this sort of insight. And I would have been 12-ish, probably a year after Mum's death. And I was out walking and I had this nihilistic insight into how reality really is, what it is. And it's this utterly mechanical, unloving, purposeless, utterly meaningless chaos of matter. And
we're just bags of meat and bone.
We're just that, exactly. And it completely unravelled my world. And I was too young to know what the hell to do with it. But it felled me, literally felled me. I had to lie on the grass. And that has been the most formative moment of my life, I think. To learn how to deal with a profoundly nihilistic view and to counter that view. And that's when I went to my sister and I said, I think I have, because I didn't know what to do.
Oh, I'm sorry. Was that memory when you were only 12? Forgive me. Then I've misunderstood.
Yeah,
I thought this happened much later, but go on.
No, just a kid. And that's when she responded rather cruelly, but in a way it snapped me out of, it sort of snapped me back into reality, I suppose. That's what I would say. Yeah. Okay,
so do you find still the purposelessness in that worldview of if we are just evolutionary meat and bones, there's nothing for us after it, then what the hell's the point of it all? Why bother doing this or that or this? Do you still feel that, or have you come on the other side?
I struggle with it all the time.
I find it totally liberating, that realization that, and obviously the jury's still out.
Indeed.
The minute that we finish our lives here, maybe we'll ascend to some pearly gates and we'll be like, damn it, we got a lot of things wrong. But if it's not the case and it is just lights out, return to the earth, the reason I find that liberating is because it means there is a finite time here for you to do something.
To be.
And it doesn't have to be great, it doesn't have to be anything, but it's here and it's up to you if you want to make it happen or not. Whether that's, falling in love with a person, potentially making another life, having an amazing career, writing an amazing book, like all this sort of stuff. That's at least on that same realization. That's more how I reacted to it. It's funny, my wife's more similar to you. She finds it very difficult to deal with.
What I would say is that it's not, for me, it's not to do with whether this life continues or doesn't continue. I'm an atheist. I think it's highly unlikely that anything continues. But, anything's possible, let's say, the great I don't know, but it just seems pretty unlikely to me.
Show me some evidence.
Yeah, right. It's deeper than that. It's that the whole thing is utterly pointless, is a cosmic nihilism, and it is hard to bear. So I do try to counter that. Buddhism has helped me a lot. I don't mean the Buddhism with bells and whistles. I mean the way Buddhist philosophy understands the human mind. I think there's an immense sophistication of understanding there. And that has helped me with that nihilism, that we walk this sort of edge between nihilism and idealism. And
it is a knife's edge.
It is a knife edge. But yes, it's uncomfortable.
Okay.
Often uncomfortable.
You have and again, I'm meditating it. If it's too sensitive, please just tell me, because I might not know the boundaries.
Yeah,
you just
sure.
tell me. But there's a prickly feeling between you and your sister. Is that an understatement? Or
look, it is an understatement, but I don't want to go there because it's not fair. It's not fair to her. If she had her own podcast, that'd be fine, but she doesn't.
Yeah.
And again, it's one of the problems with memoir, that writing a memoir, whether you like it or not, gives you the power of the word, and it isn't fair. I've included her in the book where it was absolutely essential to the structure of the story, but otherwise I haven't gone there, and I don't want to go there when I talk about it for those reasons.
Totally. No problem at all.
Yeah.
After your mother did commit suicide, why did you not go to live with your father? You went to live with his brother, I believe.
His sister.
His sister.
Twin sister. Because my dad was that sort of dad. He was an Edwardian man. He was a man's man. The idea that he would know how to raise a daughter was just...
Is that a fact? Really?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
You've got to think, this is post-Second World War, 50s generation, an older dad as well. The idea that he would raise a daughter, how would that work? And he was adorable, adorable man, but inadequate in all sorts of ways. He, of course, was also traumatised. He had found her. And it was decided, I'm not quite sure how it was decided. I think between my dad and my sister, they decided that the best thing for me would be to go to live with his twin sister, Gillian, who was a right old Tartar. Rather wonderful woman, but knew nothing about children. So yes, it was just considered that was okay. These days, that wouldn't happen.
Yeah, it'd be a social black mark.
Yeah. And also they didn't think of children in the same way that we think of children now.
Right.
They didn't understand what effects these things had on children.
Yeah. Like them not letting you keep the dog, for example.
Well, that was pretty weird, I must say. To send a motherless waif to a pet dog.
Just a little bit of empathy.
Yeah, they destroyed the dog. That is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
But
your father had a stroke while reading tracks. Do you know how far into the book he got?
I don't. The sad thing about all of that, I was living in London, because in those days the book came out in England first and then Australia, and there was quite a time gap. I think it was 6 weeks. So I knew that I would be going to Australia in 6 weeks' time to do the publicity tour, and I wrote to Dad and I said, I'll be in Australia, and I had to make a decision whether to send him an English copy of the book or take it to him when I went.
And deliver one.
Exactly. So I thought, well, no, I'll send him a copy. And he started reading it, apparently. Obviously I wasn't there. And he went to our neighbour, who had been quite involved with our family. She was a lovely woman, kind woman. And he was in tears. And the reason that I'd hesitated to send it to him was that I didn't want to stir him up. And I think there was one sentence in Tracks that obliquely refers to our family history. And I just thought, it might just stir him up too much. Lo and behold, he reads the book. He goes next door in tears because the first sentence of Tracks was, I arrived in Alice Springs with $6 and a dog, or something like that. He goes next door in tears and says, why didn't I ever give her any money?
That's horrible.
So you can't win, Poor chap. So I don't know how far he got into the book. I hope what he did read he enjoyed. He was tremendously proud of me.
That's amazing, though. He obviously would have been some type of fulfillment for you doing that journey in the first place, because it sounds like he was quite an adventurer as well.
Was, and people have made the comment that obviously I was sort of doing something that like he had done, because he'd been in Africa living the life of a big game hunter, very much the man's man.
Hemingway-esque.
Exactly. Oh, exactly. So he would never have considered that a girl should do such a thing. But the fact that I did, I think he was stunned by the fact that I did that trip. And then he became tremendously proud and sort of boring people with newspaper articles. It was great. We were great friends. Towards the end, we liked each other a lot.
And so you come out on the other end of this journey. He's so overtly proud of you.
Yeah.
He couldn't be more happy. Look at my daughter. Look what she's done.
And I think in some way it sort of atoned for something for him. He wasn't a psychologically sophisticated person, but deep in his unconscious somewhere, the fact that I had done that somehow helped him with the idea perhaps of having been a bad father.
Right. Like maybe I wasn't so bad.
Maybe I was an idiot.
And then now he sees you more as an adult. You've done this incredible feat. Is it just because of who he was and where he was from, just even talking about your mother was inconceivable?
She was never mentioned again. No. Never. Not a word.
Yeah, really sign of changing times.
Truly.
Yeah. You make this observation of Australia, which is colonial circumstance made the idea of an upper class redundant. There weren't enough of them to go around. And this is on the other side of talking about who your father was and how he was and who your mother was and how she was. And for me, having grown up in Australia, by the way, a suburb called Malabar, which is a nice synchronicity.
Gosh.
But I can't recognise that at all, and it could just be because I'm from Sydney, not the country. But at least it feels like it's a very different Australia, the one you grew up in to the one I grew up in.
It was a different Australia. We have to remember the effect of the Second World War, the men who came back, what they'd seen and been through. There wasn't the sort of understanding of
Post-traumatic stress.
Yeah, post-traumatic stress. For women it was a difficult era because they'd got some freedom during the war because they'd taken the jobs that the men had left open. And then as soon as the men came back, bang, that was it.
Total domesticity is no other option.
Absolutely. And you can see it in all the magazines, the women's magazines of that time, how suddenly the duty of a woman was to be a housewife and have children. So if you were a complicated woman who wanted a life, it was very difficult. And it must have been difficult for the men as well. So that war, we forget what wars do. The 50s were marked by that. And then the 60s happened and sort of broke all of that apart. How things changed so quickly. Yeah. I think young men now are just gorgeous.
In what aspect?
Well, there's this kind of awareness. They're softer. They seem to be more... One shouldn't make these huge generalisations.
Yeah,
obviously.
You can paint with a broad brush.
Yeah.
There's exceptions everywhere.
And then you look at the incels and all that ghastly sort of manosphere and so on, which is pretty terrifying. But, the young men I meet, let's say, I find them kind. They're kind to me. This older woman. In my era, we were horrible about older people.
Like just put them over there.
Yeah, a lot has changed, and they're more sensitive, more aware of how complex life is, and how difficult it is to find the right place in the world. They have to think.
You spoke really candidly about the decision to not have children. I think you were in your 30s when you made that decision.
Pretty much, yeah.
And
yeah.
You have a close relationship with your nieces and presumably friends, kids and so forth. But is there a part of you that regrets not having found, maybe with Narendra or just like create a new life?
No, I'm sort of not given to regret, those choices, whether they're chance or whether they were free will or not free will. They exist. You've made them already. So no, I don't regret it. And also, part of that decision was understanding that I was still a child myself in many ways. I needed to, if I was going to have a child, I would have to be so strong, because the responsibility of bringing an entity into this universe, what could be more important than that? And people treat it so lightly. They just think, I'm bored today, I'll have a baby. It just astonishes me. So I was very aware of that, the responsibility of being a good parent, of having the financial resources, of having the emotional resources, of having or not having a partner, what that would mean, having a family structure where you could get help. So I was very aware that that would be a huge thing to do. But also all my friends were not having children at that particular era, again. And the thought was, can you be an artist and a mother? Is it possible to do those two things or not? Many of us decided not. So I think it's those decisions are still extremely difficult and probably always will be.
There's a quote Colin Thubron said a few weeks ago when I interviewed him, because he as well never had any children. And he said, the enemy of creativity is the pram.
Yeah, well, it's a lot of hard work and devoted work. And I think sometimes if you want to be an artist, you have to pay a kind of bill.
Yeah, I'm terrified at the idea of taking on that huge responsibility. And therefore,
also,
am I selfish for thinking maybe I don't want to?
I don't think you're selfish at all. It's a deep, deep decision, the most important one you'll ever make, because that creature is going to have to live a life.
And you're pretty responsible for how it turns out.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. That leads us to nature versus nurture.
Oh yeah.
Which I know is one of your favorite topics, but I couldn't definitively find actually where do you come down on it.
Absolutely in the middle.
Well, that's no good.
Well, I think genetics obviously plays some part. We don't know how big a part. Nurture obviously plays a big part. How those two things interrelate, we still don't know really, but obviously they're both terribly important into how a person turns out. I do think people are born with different sorts of brains, different sorts of sort of inherited characteristics of character, all those things. But then the world impinges on that and moulds that. So when I say I'm in the middle, it is that relationship between nature and nurture that creates, and chance, chance.
But chance is the nurture side of it.
Yeah.
I suppose it's also the nature. Of course
exactly,
it is. Yeah,
it's
that's
both.
true.
Both.
You're born with a specific inclination.
Fragilities and strengths.
Yeah. But I'm sure you've observed, even between you and your sister, but I can observe between me and my brothers or my wife's siblings, very similar environments. Friends is a big one that differs.
Yeah.
But the home
Yeah.
and the values
Yeah.
and how you spend most nights
Yeah.
and most weekends,
Yeah.
yet dramatically different outcomes.
Very much so.
And makes me think that it's maybe like a 90-10 split or something. You can't dismiss nurture, obviously.
No.
But then maybe, I don't know, am I just trying to take full credit for how I become? Because it's...
Yeah, well,
it's a wobbly stage to sort of stand up.
It is. I tend to think we're less self-constructed than we want to believe,
Yeah. But specifically from a neuroscientific perspective, since this is a great interest of yours and you've done as much as you can to understand how does that all work.
Well, it keeps changing too, of course. I mean, as new research comes in, and I do try to follow it as much as I can. I love science and I read a hell of a lot. So I'm fairly literate for an amateur. But really, school's still very much out on all this stuff. It's new. It's a dramatic field. The study of consciousness, it's extraordinary. And how it's changed over the last, just even the last decade. There's a lot of new ways of thinking about it and looking at it. And, fascinating.
Narendra, the great love of your life. 20, 30 years you were together?
Pretty much, 25, something like that, yeah.
And he was from some type of aristocracy, would you call it?
Feudal aristocracy. They were called Rajputs. They were the rulers of Rajasthan. He was raised in a huge cake-like castle, but he was a most unusual man because he escaped in many ways that context, that world, and became he was always a noble, but he in many ways was also self-made, and he became a politician, a Congress politician, sort of liberal, leftish. Although India is such a different context, you can't really label it like that. He was quite a successful politician, but a bit of a maverick. An immensely astute person. He was infallible in his judgments of people, just infallible.
Can you give any examples of that?
Honestly, he was never wrong. Well, I will tell you one. He met one of my friends, very, very close friend. And afterwards he was very quiet, so I knew something was going on. And I said, "So what? And he said, "You be careful there." And it was the only real sort of argument fight we'd ever had. I said, "You don't know what you're talking about, blah, blah." And he said, "You are vulnerable because you don't have a jealous heart. But that woman has a jealous heart and she wants what you have. You be careful." A decade later, absolutely correct.
Yeah, wow. What is it that he would see in people?
Don't know. I think it was the sort of, he'd had quite a difficult childhood, so he'd had to watch people and duck and weave, and he was a damn good politician, and you have to be a good judge of character there.
Yeah.
Or how to judge what people are really after. He was infallible.
And he was Hinduist?
Yes, Hindu, born Hindu, but part of his politics was taking the side of minority Muslims who were having a hard time by Hindu fundamentalists, sort of fascists, Hindu fascists. So his constituency, he sort of was looking after, in many ways, his Muslim constituents. So he was visiting a lot of Sufi shrines and talking to the old Sufis, and he, at the end of his life, when he himself was quite vulnerable and quite ill, he converted to Islam or to Sufism, I guess you'd say, and that became very important to him. It's part of him that I never could share or understand, his religiosity, because it all looked the same to me. But obviously it was very important to him. Whether it helped him or hindered him, I've really no idea.
You write that he ended up becoming quite fundamentalist in the new faith.
No, he wasn't ever fundamentalist, not at all. And the Sufis are, generally speaking, not hardline like that. But it was important to him.
Okay.
Meant that he was in a territory where I couldn't follow him. I simply didn't get it. But I knew it, but, it was important to him, so that was fine with me.
And he ended up rubbing up against the BJP, which is the Hindu Nationalist Party that Narendra Modi is in charge of, currently in charge in India.
Correct.
And it got violent with them at some stage.
Oh, it's always been, they're card-carrying fascists. The RSS, which is what the BJP grew out of, were literally fascists. They thought Hitler was pretty terrific. It's, I think, a tragedy for India, but there you are.
How do you make sense of that now, considering India is, if not certainly among the future global economies and therefore populations and therefore cultural influences globally?
Yeah, well, we will see. He's still immensely popular. From my point of view, what he's done is not just augment communalism, the friction between Hindus and Muslims, but he's sort of taken away a kind of Indian sweetness that was so generous to the outsider, that was so incorporating of otherness. It was one of the lovely things about India, that embracing and incorporating and respect for otherness, and I see that sort of eroding
towards more of a
nationalism, specific Hindu nationalism, where the Hindus are on top and everyone, Christians and Islam and Muslims and all you other mob can get lost.
Get lost, yeah. When was the last time you were in India?
I was there when COVID started.
Okay.
And I haven't been back, but I'll go back next year and see my friends and my old staff who I love.
Mm-hmm. So you still are welcome back there like family?
My staff, no, I don't go back there because when Narendra died, the family sort of went into this, it was a feudal family, so they wanted property. And I backed out. I don't want to be part of that. But I did want to protect my staff, and I still keep in contact with them. Mm-hmm. So not the family, but I keep in touch with the staff.
And did you and Narendra ever discuss getting married?
We did, but it didn't seem, Era didn't sort of think marriage was necessary. But also we sort of never got around to it, I suppose. It was kind of that because our lives were very complicated. Our lives existed between two countries and about 5 different properties, so we were very busy people. So, yeah, we spoke about it, but never, just sort of didn't happen.
Did you ever participate in his politics?
I didn't.
In front of
No, absolutely not. He protected me from all of that, really, and protected me from family politics in a way. In a way, I was separated out from a lot of his territory, let's say, for my own good, and that made life a lot easier.
Yeah. And it was 30 years or something, your
Pretty
relationship.
Much. Yeah.
It is really hard for me to imagine, like, what is a 30-year relationship across 5 properties in 2 countries? You said you spoke on the phone every day, but am I constantly on a plane? Like, is that how it works?
It was, I think of it as quite an aristocratic marriage in the sense that I don't think we ever spent longer than 3 consecutive weeks together in all that time. There was a lot of travelling, obviously. There was a lot of interference, a lot of pressure. He was under tremendous pressure, life-threatening pressure. I was constantly going back to London, having to go back to London. So it was complicated, and both of us under a lot of stress, really, because of that structure. But yeah, pretty much every morning we were on the phone, and we didn't particularly say anything much. It was more like birds talking to each other, Mm-hmm. I'm here, yes, you're there, yes, that's it.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful way to describe it. Just checking in. Yeah, we're both still here. All right, take it easy. This is getting towards the end.
Okay.
Definitely sappy, so forgive me if it is. But I feel
You're doing fine, sir.
I feel like I want to ask it anyway.
Yeah.
The title is Unfinished Woman. Can you ever really be a finished person? There's Jung's idea of individuation and also Nietzsche's idea of becoming who you are. And the central point of both of those philosophical ideas is that you never actually do reach the end. The peak is always out of view. The horizon is always over the next hill. But it's simply just getting as close to it as possible is the life well lived to a degree. Leaning into anything like that with a title like Unfinished Woman.
Yeah.
Was that very sappy?
No, it's not sappy at all. It's, yes, I mean, the title's ambiguous and it's meant to be. I am unfinished, and I believe we're not finished till we're dead. And of course my mother was unfinished. Being female in the world is a sort of unfinished project. So yes, I think of us as gerunds rather than nouns.
Gerunds? What's a gerund?
Gerund is running, sitting, think of it is movement. So instead of
motion, not static.
Yes. We're not a thing. We're more a process than a thing.
Right. Nice.
We are processes, not things.
the allowing for all the change of that motion. You've lived all over the map. This kind of leads into it a little bit. And tell me whether you think this is the case or not. But I think one of the great, maybe unsung details behind being able to just go somewhere new when no one knows you, you have no friends there, is that not in a psychopathic way, but you can, in a sense, reinvent yourself. It's not like your personality changes, but at least there is zero baggage of all the people who knew you from where you just came.
Yeah.
And it's very sort of exciting. And
very confronting.
Yeah, but also maybe liberating too, because you realize there are these parts of myself which will always remain under a rock, because all the behavior I've done accumulated with all these people who know me. They have this idea for who Ryan is. And there's maybe Ryan wouldn't do something. Ryan isn't that type of person. Yeah. And if you think about it actually from an evolutionary perspective, it's actually really rare to get that opportunity.
To immerse in a different...
Totally different when no one knows it, because it'd be extremely dangerous at most points in history. And there are so many other barriers. Anyway, so having relocated, do you agree with that?
Yes. I think in my case, the reason for travelling the way I have, in that sort of complete immersion of letting go of everything behind and just immersing in another culture, is to biases, the sort of bias that you automatically have from your background, from your culture, from everything around you. And if you're in some place that's completely different, has different values, different ways of perceiving the world, all of those assumptions that you've carried as being normal or correct or right are put to the test. And that's a very good reason for travelling. But I think the way we travel now, that part of it is kind of gone. It's less about that and more about making elsewhere a place where you can take everything with you.
That observation you make at the end, like how we travel now, but even if you travel back then, it's more the fact that you're doing it totally alone.
Yes.
And you're doing it with no bridges.
No bridges.
You're there, who knows how long, who knows where I'll be.
Yeah.
Like that type of total immersion.
Yeah.
I think is historically uncommon.
Probably. Probably, yes. Probably. But then I've always done that, whether it was being in the criminal club, or it's that investigation of otherness, and possibly because I didn't have a particularly strong sense of myself, that I was able to do that, maybe. I don't know. But it certainly is how I can see that it has been a pattern, this immersion in otherness out of a profound curiosity, a sort of curiosity that has saved me, really, and this wish to get further and further and further to something true.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever come close to that answer?
No, I'm still heading in that direction.
Did it make you more empathetic and maybe less judgmental?
Yeah, I think so.
Just across the board, seeing how different people are?
Yes, I think so, definitely.
But did it then harden your own idea for what a life well lived is?
I don't know what a life well lived is. It depends on the person.
Right,
you can have someone who's never shifted out of a village and has raised children and dug in the dirt, and it could have been a magnificent life.
If science allowed you to live, say, 100 years, and you have all the physical vigour that you could hope for, where would you want to go?
Certainly not Mars.
No?
Well, of course, in 100 years it'll all be different. So I'd simply be in another place. It would be another place.
No, but I mean right now, you're guaranteed 100 more years.
Well, where would I like to go? I'd certainly go back to India. I'm very interested in Greenland, and not just because Trump wants to buy it. Yeah, there's a lot going on there.
Nomads of a different stripe.
There's so much sort of global stuff going on there. And of course, I have great sympathy for the Inuit. I'd like to get to know the Samis. I definitely go back to Tibet.
Right. Yeah, you said that was the most beautiful place.
I think it's the most beautiful place I've ever been. Just stunning. And the people stunningly beautiful. Probably a very sad place now, but, things change. Where else? I don't know. Sort of anywhere, everywhere. But as I say, in 100 years, if I sit still in this house, everything will be different. So in a sense, I will have travelled anyway.
Yeah, the Melbourne sprawl would have made it.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
I really tried figuring out whether you'd ever done anything with the Berber people or
no, never.
with the Bedouin.
No.
It just strikes me as, not to brand you, because obviously that's in the antithesis to everything we've been saying, but camels, nomadic people, desert.
Camels are completely secondary. It's the nomadism that I'm interested in, the way that moving, that kind of moving through the world makes for different qualities. So, for example, nomads tend to value knowledge above material possessions. They can't carry many material possessions, but they have to know a lot if they're going to survive. They have to know their environment very well. They have to be good diplomats because they're constantly dealing with otherness. They have to hang together and look after each other. All of those sorts of values, and from my experience, small experience really, of being with those sorts of cultures, it is like that. Their values tend to be centred around knowledge systems, tend to be less materialistic or less consumer-driven. Yeah. So their values are different.
If you start building big edifices, do you inevitably become consumering?
How do you mean? Not quite sure.
The opposite of that observation, that the nomadic people will value knowledge above consuming because they just simply can't carry it. But then if we get off a ship and start building in Sydney Harbour and are rooted there, sleep there every night, start putting things around our house, does consumerism become inevitable at that stage?
It's too complicated a question because consumerism has gone through so many phases. So, if you want to begin with agriculture, suddenly there's this change where grain has to be stored and protected. You have to have a standing army. You have to set up a system of a mercantile system. So there's these huge fundamental changes. Does materialism or consumerism begin there? Well, sort of, yeah. It's more complicated than that, but certainly the sort of storage of things and being sedentary does make a big difference. And then, you come through these periods of countries forming and nation building and technology changing and industrial revolution and now the digital revolution and the rise of capitalism. And these are huge factors in how we're all controlled and manipulated. And these systems are built that we don't seem to be able to get out of. And obviously they're very destructive systems. And how we'll survive that, well, we just don't know.
Robyn, almost every interview I've done, I've asked some variation of what the role of serendipity has been in their lives. So 2 quotes from you, one from Tracks. There are some moments in your life that are like pivots, and then from Unfinished Woman. I seem to have an unusually fateful life. Coincidences have produced enormous effects. And so the theme has run throughout this interview, but nonetheless, I want to ask you directly how you make sense of the role that serendipity has played in your life.
Sort of everything. Chance has thrown me extraordinary opportunities. And because I have a particular temperament and character, I've tended to leap into those opportunities fairly blindly and just trusted that I'll make my way. We've already talked about this idea of free will. I think we have much less free will than we give ourselves credit for. So chance plays a part in everything, and how we react to that is where there may be some free will, or maybe not.
And if we think of great moments of serendipity, Rick's photos taking off, you
Absolutely.
meeting Narendra,
Writing to Doris.
It's
all of it.
the life can be understood backwards, right? But it must be lived forwards. There's
Yeah.
no telling, actually, of the infinite possibilities, which route we're going to end up in.
Truly.
Well, look, Robyn, you've been rather way too generous with your time with me. Thank you for inviting me down here.
It's been a pleasure, Ryan, really.
Thank you. And it's cool to see Diggity number 2 has been napping this entire time.
Been very well behaved.
But really, thank you so much.
Thank you.